This is Dave Chen from /film.com, and this is Movies Explained: The Fountain. Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain was released in 2006 and didn't do particularly well critically or commercially. After failing earlier to make the film with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett in the leads, Aronofsky had to go back to the drawing board, trim the budget down to $35 million, and recast his lead actors. Despite producing what may have been a better, more raw film, The Fountain only grossed $15 million worldwide and received a 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. Richard Roeper called it one of the worst movies of the year. Dana Stevens from Slate called it a really stupid movie, but in the intervening years, The Fountain has gained somewhat of a cult following, and in my opinion, that's been very well deserved. One of the problems with the film, if you can call it a problem, is the fact that the narrative is not straightforward. It doesn't explain things, it doesn't hold your hand. It has a healthy disregard for conventional narrative features. More importantly, plot lines seamlessly and visually blend in with each other, and this can be a genuinely confusing experience.
What are you doing here?
Take a walk with me.
I have too much work.
It's the first snow.
Yeah, I know, but they're waiting on me.
Come on, Tommy.
Please, Izzy.
It makes the viewer unsure of what's real, what's a vision, or what's meant to be just a visual parallel. The upside of this, though, is that it does reward repeat viewings, and it does create a very singular cinematic experience. There are many differing interpretations of the basic plot of the film, and this video is my attempt at putting forward my own theory and to explain why I think it's true. So what's the actual plot of The Fountain? The Fountain takes place in 3 parallel timelines. In the 16th century, Tomás Verde is trying to find the Tree of Life in order to beat back the Inquisition that threatens his queen's rule. In present day, Dr. Tom Creo is trying to find a cure for his wife's brain tumor. And in the future, in the year 2500, a man who I'll just refer to as Astro Tom is traveling through space in an organic spaceship to reach the Xibalba Nebula. So let's dive in, shall we? Part 1. What's real and what's not? In my opinion, the portion of the film featuring the Spanish conquistador version of Tomás is a dramatization of Izzy's book. The other 2 versions of Tom, that is to say Dr. Tom Creo and Astro Tom, are the same person. Astro Tom is Tom Creo 500 years in the future. There are many visual clues that indicate that this is the case. For example, both Dr. Tom Creo and Astro Tom use the same exact pen to tattoo themselves with, and the future version of the pen is incredibly busted up. Dr. Tom Creo tattoos himself a ring in present day, and we see that Astro Tom has the same exact ring tattoo. A lot of people are confused by how the spaceship looks. It really doesn't look like spaceships from any other movie that we've seen before. In an interview Darren Aronofsky did with Total Film, he explains it as follows, quote, "We definitely wanted to move science fiction away from the technolust, button-pushing science fiction that we've been stuck with. It's funny, this trucks in space idea, spaceships that look like trucks. People see our bubble ship, and people that aren't sci-fi fans, they don't get that that's a spaceship, which to me was unexpected." End quote. So let's assume for now that Tom Creo and Astro Tom are the same individual. That still raises another question. It's pretty clear what Tomás Verde is trying to do, it's pretty clear what Dr. Tom Creo is trying to do, but what is Astro Tom trying to do? There are precious few clues as to what Astro Tom is actually up to, and honestly, I'm still not 100% sure it makes total sense. About 2/3 of the way through the film, Astro Tom whispers the following, which I'm just gonna quote to you guys right now. "Don't worry, we're almost there. Through that last dark cloud is a dying star, and soon enough, Xibalba will die, and when it explodes, you will be reborn, you will bloom, and I will live." End quote. The question here is, what is this tree he's talking to? There are a couple of possible answers to that question. Towards the end of the film, we see Tommy plant a seed on Izzy's grave, then look up at the sky towards Xibalba. To me, it's highly likely this seed grew into the tree he's taking up with him into space. Another possibility, he's taking the Tree of Life from Central America, the one that revitalized Donovan from early on in the movie.
Remember that ethnobotanical compound we played around with last year?
Which one? From that tree? That one from Central America?
This would explain why the tree is able to sustain his life for hundreds of years into the future. When we last see the Tom Creo storyline, they are fully exploring how to extend life using that tree's biological materials, so it seems likely to me that that's how it could be used.
The Donovan breakthrough is our starting point. It's just a starting point. All right, let's build on it. Stop aging, stop dying. Stop dying, that's our goal.
But I actually think it's possible that both answers are true. That is to say, this is both the Tree of Life and it's a tree that he's planted on Izzy's grave. They're the same tree. It's his way of keeping Izzy with him, but he's taking it with him to space, to Xibalba, so that it'll be reborn and extend both his own life and that of the trees. But does that plan make any sense at all? Part 2. Death is the road to awe. The film is about Tom Creo's quest to accept the idea of death. Throughout the movie, Tom seems to despise death. He spends his free time trying to fight it at the exclusion of spending time with his dying wife.
Come on, Tommy.
Please, Izzy.
I'm sorry. I am.
I'll see you tonight, okay?
He hates the idea that it's taking her away from him, and towards the end of the film, he vows to destroy it.
Death is a disease. It's like any other. And there's a cure. A cure. And I will find it.
But Izzy has accepted death. She's trying to get Tom to accept that death, life, it's all part of the amazing universe we live in. Death and life are just different sides of the same experience, and death is not to be feared.
They'd planted a seed over his grave. The seed became a tree. Moses said his father became part of that tree. He grew into the wood, into the bloom. And when a sparrow ate the tree's fruit, his father flew with the birds. He said death was his father's road to awe. That's what he called it.
This is ultimately what Izzy's book is about. Although it's ostensibly a story of Tomas finding the Fountain of Youth, Izzy never finishes it. She leaves it to Tom to finish it, something that he refuses to do throughout the film.
It's all done except the last chapter. I want you to help me.
How?
Finish it. Finish it.
I don't know how it ends. Please, leave me alone.
Finish it.
Stop it! Stop it! What do you want? Leave me alone! Please, please.
Dr. Tom Creo / Astro Tom is afraid to finish Izzy's book because he's afraid of death, because he's been fighting death for the whole movie. But when the tree can no longer sustain him, centuries into the future, that's when he finally decides to accept death and finish Izzy's story. The movie actually begins with the last part of the book that Izzy has written, which we can assume Astro Tom is dreaming because we see him wake up from that dream. At the end of the film, Astro Tom's insertion into the story is an indication that Astro Tom has finished Izzy's book. It's taken him literally hundreds of years to finish it, hundreds of years to come to terms with death's place in his life, but he's finally done it. One question a lot of people have is, why does the Spanish conquistador Tom drink from the Tree of Life only to essentially experience death by flower growth? On a basic level, it's clear that the Tree of Life didn't extend Tomas's life in the way he wanted to. But in a broader sense, it's because Astro Tom, the one finishing the story, has finally come to terms with the fact that death is the road to awe. That living forever doesn't mean what he thinks it means necessarily. It can instead mean that you become part of the earth, that your life gives way to new life, even if you're not conscious enough to experience it. Tomas essentially becomes first father at the end of the film, a being whose life begets more life. So what happens at the end of the movie? As we discussed earlier, Astro Tom is on a journey to Xibalba so that he and his tree can live forever. I don't really think it's a rational plan. I mean, was there really any way he could have survived that explosion at the end? Was the implication that if he hadn't left his bubble, he might have survived and the tree would have been reborn? I'm not sure. That being said, we see that Tommy is not a rational person. What kind of person tries to fight death? What kind of person goes on a quest across the stars just for a chance at preserving his own life or that of his loved one? It actually all fits into Tommy's character. And more to the point, it's the kind of stuff epic love stories are made of. A person who is willing to do insane things in the name of a love that spans centuries. So even though it doesn't make sense in the conventional sense of the term, I don't actually count that against the movie. I think it actually does make sense in the case of Tommy Creo. Part 3. Alternative interpretations and other random symbolism. There are a few other random things I wanted to point out about the fountain. Firstly, some alternative interpretations. One interpretation concludes that it's actually all a book, and that the final section with Astro Tom is actually part of the book itself that Izzy wrote. The biggest clue to this is when Izzy says that her book begins in Spain but ends in Xibalba.
My book. I'm writing about it.
I thought it took place in Spain.
Begins there. Ends there.
Are you done?
Almost.
Good, when do I read it?
Another interpretation is that Tom, Tomas, and Astro Tom are reincarnated versions of the same person. There are a lot of visual parallels in the movie, like the 3 shots of the Thomases riding off to conquer death, or in the way that they touch the Tree of Life. These are both fine ways to solve the puzzle in this film, but they're just not the ones that I choose to believe in. Darren Aronofsky has said of this film, quote, "It's very much like a Rubik's Cube, where you can solve it in several different ways, but ultimately there's only one solution at the end," end quote. I don't really buy that at all, as evidenced by the fact that multiple, equally plausible interpretations have sprung up in the intervening years. But whatever, Darren Aronofsky can basically say whatever he wants, because in my book he's created one of the most beautiful films of all time. There's a bunch of other visual symbolism in the film, and I'll leave it to others to explain it better than myself, but here's an incredibly quick rundown. Feel free to take these or leave these, depending on what kind of person you are. Firstly, the Xibalba Nebula looks incredibly vaginal, perhaps symbolizing how it gives life. The life-giving substance from the Tree of Life looks like, well, another life-giving substance. When Astro Tom eats from the tree, the visual is very similar to that of someone taking communion, a practice in which we take of someone's body so that we may have life. On that note, there are crosses everywhere throughout the movie, such as in this elevator or in the light that we see in the door where Izzy exits. On multiple occasions, Tom tries but is unable to put on a ring. In our culture, a ring typically symbolizes the endless nature of love. My interpretation is that his inability to put it on shows that man's desire to make things everlasting will always be flummoxed by the ephemeral nature of our existence. And what of the white light that Izzy sees from the sky? I think it represents both death and enlightenment, which this movie kind of makes equivalent. You see it when the Queen gives Tommy his quest, when Izzy is about to die in the museum. It also occurs when Tommy makes his realizations, like at the lab when he decides to use the tree to revive Donovan.
No, wait.
In conclusion, this is one interpretation of the film, and I recognize that there are some issues with it, but I invite you to share your own, both in the comments and by email. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I urge you to check it out. It has amazing performances, gorgeous imagery and cinematography, and seriously one of the best film scores ever written by composer Clint Mansell. If this video has helped you better understand the film, then I'm grateful that it shed some light on one of my favorite movies of all time. You can find more of my work by subscribing to this YouTube page, following me on Twitter at Dave Chensky, checking out my website at davechen.net, or going to /film.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.